Church lobby, business card swaps. The room empties after the last song and the hallway becomes the real service. People smile fast, scan faces, and drift toward whoever seems useful. A handshake turns into a pitch, then a quick laugh, then a promise to connect this week. You can feel it in your chest, that strange mix of warmth and distance. You were surrounded by believers, but you were not known, and you wonder why you still feel alone. Real community moves slow. It grows in kitchens, not just corridors. But the church lobby can become a marketplace without anyone saying it out loud. Conversations shrink into headlines, job titles, side hustles, who you know, what you're building. Some Christians openly debate whether networking at church is a gift or a problem, which shows how common this tension is. When connection becomes a strategy, it stops feeling like family. The distortion is subtle. You start choosing where to stand based on who might notice. You avoid the awkward person because they can't help you. You pass by the grieving member because you do not know what to say. Soon, people become doors, not neighbors. And the saddest part is that nobody has to be cruel for it to happen. All it takes is a culture that rewards visibility more than faithfulness. So you go home with a pocket full of cards and an empty week ahead. You met 10 people, yet nobody will bring you soup when you are sick. You heard 100 names, yet nobody knows your fears. The lobby was busy, but your life stayed quiet. Genuine community is not built by quick contact. It is built by costly presence, over time, with the same imperfect people. Marketplace ministry, Christian business networking mixers. It often starts with good intentions. A church hosts a marketplace night, and the room fills with dreamers. There are name tags, coffee, and bright stories about purpose. The language is spiritual, but the air feels like a trade show. People ask what you do before they ask how you are. You leave inspired but also unsettled, like you just attended 2 different gatherings at once. Work matters to God, and Christians should support each other. But a mixer can quietly replace a deeper kind of care. Instead of learning someone's burdens, you learn their brand. Instead of prayer that stays when the night ends, you collect contacts that vanish by Monday. Some Christians even argue online about business promotion in church spaces, which tells you the struggle is not rare. The danger is not business. It is turning people into resources. Here is how it distorts us. The most confident voice becomes the most listened to voice. The most successful story becomes the most anointed story. Strugglers feel pressure to sound blessed instead of telling the truth. And those with simple jobs can feel invisible, like they do not belong in the room. A community becomes a ladder, and everyone is tempted to climb. But the church is not supposed to feel like a career fair. When life breaks, you do not need a lead. You need a friend who will sit with you. If you have felt this pull between faith and hustle, share it in the comments. Christian conferences and speaker circuit. The lights dim, the stage glows, and the crowd leans forward. There is something powerful about thousands singing the same words. You feel hope rise and you think, maybe this is what unity looks like. Then the weekend ends. You drive home with a tote bag, a phone full of clips, and a silent question. Why do I feel full for 2 days, then empty again by Thursday? Conferences are not evil. They can teach, encourage, and connect believers across distance. But conference culture can become a substitute for the local ordinary work of loving people. Some Christian writers warn that constant conference consumption can train us to depend on personalities and content instead of daily obedience in relationships. It is easier to travel for inspiration than to stay and forgive someone who annoys you. The misuse shows up in what we chase. We hunt for the best teacher as if faith is a playlist. We quote speakers more than we quote scripture. We treat the green room like a holy place, and we forget the quiet saints in folding chairs. Even networking at conferences can feel spiritual, while really being about access. And access can become an idol without anyone admitting it. So the high becomes a habit. You keep buying tickets because it feels like growth. But growth that does not attach you to real people is fragile. At home, your neighbor still needs help moving. Your small group still needs honesty. Your church still needs patient love. The deepest formation often happens when nobody claps for it. Leadership summits and pastor, ministry, influencer gatherings. There is a special kind of room where everyone is smiling and everyone is measuring. The badges are thicker, the photos are sharper, the language is filled with impact and platform. And if you listen closely, you can hear the unspoken question under every compliment. How big is your ministry now? How fast is it growing? Who knows your name? Leadership matters, and churches need wise leaders. But leadership events can drift into celebrity culture. When the goal becomes being seen near the right people, something breaks inside the soul. You start curating relationships the way you curate a feed. You learn to speak in slogans because slogans travel farther. And slowly, leadership becomes performance, not service. The distortion is painful because it feels holy. People trade stories like trophies. They make future plans with people they barely know, then forget the local volunteer who stayed late to clean. They talk about caring for their team, but ignore their family at home. The hardest part is that nobody has to lie. They just have to chase growth without guarding their heart. And then you return to your church, and it feels small. Not because it is unimportant, but because your eyes were trained on bigger stages. Real community rarely looks impressive. It looks like meals, hospital visits, and honest apologies. If you have watched influence replace intimacy, you can name it in the comments. Worship nights as status and access events. You walk into a worship night and everything feels perfect. The sound is cinematic, the lighting is gentle, people raise hands and the room swells with emotion. Then you notice the lines, the reserved seats, the wristbands, the backstage door. You realize there are layers to the night and not everyone is allowed into the same experience. Worship nights can be beautiful, but they can also borrow the logic of concerts. There have been public debates in Christian spaces about VIP worship ticket packages and what they say about celebrity and money. Even when leaders mean well, the structure can teach a lesson. Closeness is purchased, access is earned, and presence is ranked. That lesson seeps into how people treat each other. The misuse shows up in who feels seen. The loud worshiper gets affirmed. The connected volunteer gets invited. The quiet person leaves unnoticed. People come to be moved, but not always to be known. Some nights become a place to get a moment, then disappear. Emotion becomes the product, and if someone does not feel the high, they assume something is wrong with them. The consequence is a hollow kind of unity. Everyone sang the same chorus, but nobody shared the same life. You can cry in a crowd and still be alone. Real worship should push us toward love, not status. If your worship spaces have invisible tears, the weak will always feel it first. Young adult social nights that never become friendship. It is Tuesday night and the room is full of energy. Someone tells a funny story. Someone leads a game. People laugh and it feels alive. Then the night ends and everyone walks to their cars alone. Next week, the same thing happens again and again. You start to wonder how you can be surrounded so often, yet still have nobody to call when your life caves in. Young adult gatherings are not bad. Many are sincere attempts to help people connect. But some writers argue that young adults are often treated like a demographic to manage, not persons to shepherd into real church life. When the focus is the event itself, the goal becomes attendance. And when attendance is the goal, depth becomes optional. It is easy to host a crowd. It is hard to build a family. The distortion is that fun becomes the proof of health. Hard conversations get delayed. Confession feels risky. Nobody wants to be the sad person at the hangout. So you keep it light and you keep it moving. People exchange numbers, but nobody follows up. The room stays friendly, but nobody belongs. It is connection without covenant, and it burns out quietly. Then a crisis hits and the group feels thinned. You realize you have acquaintances, not anchors. The answer is not more games. It is shared life, smaller circles, and time that costs something. If you have felt lonely in a crowd at church, you can say so in the comments. One-off, serve days that substitute for shared life. It feels good to wear the feels good to shirt. You show up early, take a group photo, and grab a trash bag or a paint roller. For a few hours, you are part of something clear and simple. People smile, a leader prays. You go home tired in a clean way, and for a moment you feel like the church is alive. But something can go wrong when this becomes the main form of togetherness. Service is central to Christian life. The problem is substitution. One day of effort can start to replace long-term presence. We can confuse "we did something" with "we are with people." You can clean a park and still never learn your teammate's story. You can build a ramp and still never visit the person you built it for. Community is not a project. It is a people. The distortion is that quick wins become the metric. Churches love measurable outcomes because outcomes look like faithfulness. But love is often not measurable. Love looks like staying. Love looks like showing up again next week when the cameras are gone. When the schedule is packed with one-off events, people get stretched thin, and nobody has time for slow friendship. Even volunteers can start to feel like tools. And after the photo is posted, the loneliness returns. You served beside strangers, then went back to private life. The fix is not less service. The fix is deeper roots. Who are you serving with month after month until you actually know each other? If you have felt this gap between serving and belonging, tell me in the comments. Small groups built as assimilation pipelines, not family. It sounds like the perfect plan. Get everyone into a group. Leaders say it because they want people cared for, and often it works. But sometimes the group is not a home, it is a system. You are not being invited into a family, you are being processed. And you can feel it in the questions people ask. Not "how are you?" but "are you plugged in yet?" Many churches talk openly about assimilation strategies to keep new believers from drifting away, and small groups are often part of that structure. The intent can be protection and discipleship. But when the system becomes the priority, the person becomes secondary. The group becomes a checkpoint. Attendance becomes proof. And if you do not fit the mold, you feel like a problem to solve, not a soul to love. The distortion is that transparency turns into compliance. People share just enough to look healthy. Leaders collect information, but not always intimacy. Friendships form, but only inside the program's boundaries. And if someone struggles in a messy way, they can feel pressure to graduate into serving instead of being held gently. Churches can confuse retention with care because both look like participation. Then one day you miss a few weeks and nobody notices. Or you realize your group only exists because the calendar says so. Real community can survive a canceled meeting. It can survive a bad season. It grows beyond the schedule. The goal is not to reject small groups. The goal is to build relationships that do not feel like a funnel. If you like our content, consider subscribing. Or some topics didn't made in the list or topics that you want us to feature, please leave in the comments. Maybe the hardest truth is this. Networking is fast and community is slow. Networking can be done with a smile and no vulnerability. Community demands truth, forgiveness, and time. Many of these events are not wrong by themselves. The danger is when they become replacements, when they become the only way we connect. If your church life is busy but your life is unsupported, you are not crazy. You are hungry for what Jesus actually formed, a people, not a crowd.